What is the hardest boss fight in every Mario RPG? To answer that, we gotta start with Super Mario RPG, which is a pretty smooth ride throughout. The combat's forgiving, the pacing's good, if not a little too fast, honestly. And for most of the runtime, it's not very challenging. Then you can choose to buy fireworks from a shop in Moleville, trade them to a girl outside her house for a shiny stone, use it to open a locked door in Monster Town, and walk in with no idea of what's waiting on the other side. Final Fantasy music starts playing, and this creature that looks like he's from a completely different game shows up. Kulix is the hardest fight in this game, and I don't really think that's much of a competition. Each crystal acts on its own turn, which just makes the fight even more grueling. Each one is immune to its own element and weak to the opposite, which kills a lot of Mal's usefulness immediately since most of his multi-target moves do nothing here. So you'll pretty much need Peach healing without exception while Mario and Geno chip crystals down one at a time using the right attacks at the right targets. This fight just goes on and on. Like, it really tests your patience. Even when you arrive at the right level with a full item bag, Kulix has enough HP across all 5 targets that even full inventories can get worn down. The recommended level for this is something like 20, honestly maybe even a little higher. Everyone has their strategies for this, and some of them definitely do make this easier, but also sometimes it's just better to figure it out on your own. Anyway, Kulix is the most difficult boss in the game, but in this video I also want to talk about mandatory boss battles as well, if the most challenging is optional. And with that in mind, my pick is Smithy here. His tank head has a move called Magnum, which can instant KO someone. The magic head has the most powerful spells in the game. The treasure head inflicts status elements on the whole party, and a surprising amount of the fight comes down to whether Magnum decides Peach is the target at the worst possible moment. For a final boss that's a lot of luck, this fight isn't unmanageable or anything, but it also feels more difficult since most of the boss battles here aren't anything too crazy, and then you just go to this. Now, if you're going to be taking a while to finish some of these boss fights, you're going to be sitting down for a while and want to be comfortable. That's where the sponsor of this video, Boolies, comes in, specifically their EP500 chair. The EP500 is an ergonomic chair designed for long gaming, editing, or work sessions with a big focus on comfort and adjustability. It features adaptive lumbar support that adjusts to your back, adjustable armrest, customizable seat depth and headrest positioning, and a reclining backrest with a built-in footrest for when you want to lean back between sessions. It also uses a breathable hybrid mesh material that's designed to help keep you cool and comfortable during extended use. And the overall design is made to support a wide range of body types and sitting positions so you could really adjust to what feels best for you. If you want to learn more or check out one for yourself, links will be down in the description. Huge thanks to Boolies for sponsoring this video. Paper Mario is another game that isn't super challenging, at least for the most part. I'm just gonna say Crystal King is the hardest boss fight in the game in my opinion, and the boss that made me want to rage quit the most. Heals 20 HP a couple times, and it just always seems to kick in at the worst time. Like you've built up a really solid run of turns, just watch his health drop, and then it just goes back up. In the back half, the crystal bits he summons start acting on their own turns and hitting independently, so you're suddenly taking chip damage from multiple directions at once. And on top of that, he can create illusions of himself, so you have to sort through before you can target the real one. So you're potentially burning attacks on a fake while the real Crystal King heals again, and the bits keep chipping away. Each individual piece of this fight is survivable. All of them at once, though, with a Thun item bag, is where this really starts to fall apart. Now, some people also might argue Huff and Puff is actually the harder fight, and I get it. He spawns a Tough Puff for every point of damage he takes, which heals him if you don't destroy them. He's immune to lightning, which cuts off a lot of your options, and his desperate attack when he gets low hits for 15 damage. He's a wall for a lot of players in Chapter 6. For me, I still think Crystal King is harder, but I think Huff and Puff is definitely a fair choice here. The hardest optional fight in this game is one a lot of people don't even know exists. I actually didn't even know until my second playthrough. In Bowser's Castle near the end, there's a trivia section, and if you fail the quiz, a guard door summons 3 anti-guys instead of letting you through. Each has 50 HP and hits for up to 12 damage, which at that point ends you really quickly without a plan. Not anything too crazy here, but I did want to give a mention to the hardest optional boss fight too. And you know what's easier than boss fights? Subscribing. I have a bunch of other Mario RPG videos you can see on screen, so if you like this, you'll probably be interested in at least one of those. And if you sub now, you'll be one of my first 15,000 subscribers. I got Superstar Saga shortly after I got my DS when I was 4 years old, and most of it was pretty manageable even for a 4-year-old whose gaming experience consisted of Super Mario 64 DS, Flash games, and that one Fisher-Price looking bike game, whatever it was called. Superstar Saga was the first RPG I ever played, so it shouldn't come as a surprise that I took days to beat Cackleta's soul. It's the hardest fight in the game and one of the hardest in the series. You fight Bowletta, the game's apparent final boss, and that isn't anything crazy, but then you get hit with a bomb, fall unconscious, and get swallowed into her body. Talk about foreshadowing. And both brothers are standing there with 1 HP. I died shortly after that opening so many times at age 4, and since I don't have an older brother, I had no one I could ask for help. As long as you have healing items, you can recover, but then the real fight begins. You have to destroy both arms and the head to expose the heart, which is where her actual HP, which is something like 1200 in the original, is. You get a window to attack before she revives everything you've just destroyed, and then the whole cycle resets. And she gains new attacks as the heart takes damage, the lightning storm gets harder to read, the energy balls come faster, all while you started this with 1 HP after another boss fight. Also remember, if you die, you go back to before Bowletta it and have to run through her again before you get another shot at Cacoletta's soul. Now, Belletta isn't that difficult of a boss, and I guess if you're playing this on a virtual console or NSO, you can just make a save point. But back in 2007, when I first played this on my DS, we did not have that luxury. Honestly, I'm still not even sure how I did beat Cacoletta's soul, but I do vividly remember the ending music. The Thousand Year Door is my second favorite game in the series, and I've played through it quite a few times. Shadow Queen is still the toughest for me every time I reach her. Not because I don't know the fight, like I do, but she's the kind of boss where one bad sequence of decisions early costs you everything later, and the difficulty implies that you're actually supposed to fight throughout the game to get your level high enough where it's more manageable. But I mean, that can be said for like all of these. I really miss when Paper Mario games actually encourage combat. Anyway, the fight has a reputation for splitting people pretty cleanly in two. Some people have real problems with this, dying like 6 or 7 times when they do this. Others say they could do it on their first try, and both groups are right because it's their own experience. The difference almost always comes down to whether they know about the invincibility phase. Also, if they decided to spend a lot of time fighting, but again, that can be said for any game. After roughly half her HP goes down, she reveals her true form and goes... You can't damage her at all. A lot of players at this point will just burn through everything trying to force it. I know I did the first time. Like, they think that there'll be just one attack that will break the immunity, but it won't. The phase ends through a story event. The crystal stars scatter back across the world. Everyone who knows Mario sends their wishes to break the Shadow Queen's power, and Peach's spirit briefly takes control to restore your HP, FP, and SP. When all of that is happening though, the Shadow Queen reaches into the audience and drains their life force, restoring herself to full HP. So you're now facing a full health Shadow Queen with an empty inventory, and for most first time players, the run effectively ends there and you have to restart. Once you know the invincibility will run out like a Resident Evil Generations pack inventory, the fight changes completely. Her true form hits up to 3 times per turn with attacks that pierce defense, so raw HP matters more than badges here, even though having good badges obviously will help. The hand she summons drain HP directly and have to be dealt with before they snowball. Star Power, save for Power Lift, is what gives you the damage output to push through the back half before you just run out. Besides Shadow Queen, you could also argue Bonetail, who's at the bottom of the pit of 100 trials. No saving and leaving to go elsewhere, just 100 floors of enemies standing between you and her. 200 HP, attack of 8, defense of 8, and her breath attacks rotate through pretty much every status element in the game. So without feeling fine badges, you have to deal with poison, sleep, dizziness, on top of everything else. She also heals when her HP gets low. By raw numbers, she's harder than Shadow Queen. In practice, the fight itself kind of feels artificially difficult, because to get there, your items are going to be depleted and your soul's just crushed from just 100 floors over the course of 4 to 5 hours. And you don't have to do this in one sitting. Like, you can take a break and come back, but you're not actually able to leave and do other stuff. Like, you have to stick with it and not go anywhere else. So even though that's not actually part of the boss fight, I feel like that kind of factors into. Partners in Time is, in my opinion, the hardest Mario and Luigi game. Now, the first time I played this, I was like 6 or 7, and it was brutal. Like, I went searching for 2 weeks in multiple GameStops to find a copy of this game just to deal with this. But even when I replayed it when I was a teenager, it was still difficult. This is the only Mario and Luigi game, and maybe the only Mario RPG in general, where I had to actually go back to other areas and level up more because I just kept losing over and over again. Elder Princess Shroob is the hardest fight here. So of course Shrowser comes after her, but by the time you reach Shrowser, you just pretty much need a break. Plus that fight's easier here, so this feels like the real final boss. Phase 1 is a UFO fleet where she commands waves dropping from the top screen. The pattern's not too hard to read, especially after a few attempts, but the attacks hit hard and the timing on some is pretty unforgiving. She could also recall the UFOs at any point to restore 120 HP if you let them sit. Destroying them cuts the healing off, but chasing them costs you turns you could be dealing damage. This phase isn't too bad. I feel like the mistake people make is treating it like the hard part and spending through Bros items freely to get through it cleanly. You need them more in a minute, and phase 2 is going to start with whatever you have left. Once phase 2 starts, there's no transition, there's no healing, there's no screen wipe. Her second form drops in with whatever HP you walked out of phase 1 carrying, which on a first run is often not great. The structure now requires you to take down her leg tentacles before the body opens up to reveal damage, and then you target the crown, except the crown only takes 1 damage per hit while it's flashing gold. While she keeps throwing arm attacks and projectiles at you, you're already low on items, you're sitting there chipping away 1 point at a time waiting for the gold to stop so you can do something. This is just a really great final boss fight because it doesn't feel unfair either. Like, it doesn't feel like it's just artificially difficult because of how much health she has. Like, this generally just feels like a difficult boss fight. Super Paper Mario is one of my favorite games of all time, but it is also extremely easy. Like, look at the second to last chapter boss. But there has to be a hardest boss in the game, though. The same way there has to be a most difficult light switch to flip in your house. And the one that actually gives me the most trouble is Shadow. Shadu? Should you want to subscribe to Domainy? I don't know. However it's pronounced, it's the most difficult boss fight in this game. So even before the fight, you have to complete the 100 trials 2 separate times, and then you finally get the privilege to face Shadow, who takes the form of Dark Luigi, Dark Bowser, Dark Peach, and Dark Mario, each 100 HP. Each using the full moveset of whoever they're copying, so it's 400 HP total, double what the final boss has. And Dark Bowser actually has the strongest attack in the game. And yeah, One more thing is that Shadow can try and heal, but you can also try and stop it. Even with all that, this really isn't that tough. Just like with Bonetail and Thousand Year Door, I feel like the higher difficulty comes from just getting worn down and having less items. Count is the hardest mandatory fight, technically the penultimate boss. Penultimate is just a fun word to say and makes me wish we got a game called Super Smash Bros. Penultimate. Anyway, he starts with a barrier that the Pure Hearts have to break before you can even damage him, and while that's playing out, his attacks just keep coming and they don't stop coming. He's got a vortex that sucks you towards him and slows you down, shadow projectiles you can't block, and a charge dash that hits you pretty hard. The slowing effect is the really nasty part because it stacks with everything else that makes the later attacks in the sequence much harder to dodge. I feel like Super Dementio after him is dramatically scarier on paper, but the fight itself is just a little easier. So none of these will really give you too much trouble, especially if you just have some items. I really wish we got a hard mode in Super Paper Mario because it would have just made this game so much better. Bowser's Inside Story has the best final boss theme in the series, and makes that boss one of the best fights in the series, but even besides that, this is fun. It's actually really cool because this has two simultaneous battles. One of them is Bowser fighting Dark Bowser outside, while Mario and Luigi fight the Dark Star core inside Bowser's body, connected so that every time Bowser depletes Dark Bowser's HP, he staggers and coughs out the core for the brothers to attack. The core has its own phases, transforms into a Fawful powered form with breakable components, and has to be fully destroyed for the fight to end. This fight is super difficult, but it's honestly one of the most rewarding in the entire series. Like, there's really not much else to say. The attacks hit hard, they can be hard to dodge, and you have to survive both versions of it. So this isn't actually the hardest boss fight in the game. I think Bowser X is harder, but I don't really count him because it's not mandatory and it's not even like it's just a simple optional boss. He's at the end of the challenge node, which is reachable only after clearing all X bosses consecutively. He comes with 3 new attacks that don't exist in the base game. The Shy Guy Squad counter has a timing window that gets tighter the longer it goes. His giant transformation has him growing to enormous size and launching fireballs you can only avoid by reading the shadows, then chasing you through a gauntlet of fire you have to jump at the right moment. Like, one mistime counter can deal damage that can cut your HP roughly in half. And yeah, this is one of the most brutal fights in the series, but you do not have to do it. In the 3DS remake, once Bowser X hits roughly half HP, a Fury mechanic kicks in. He gets a stat boost, consumes a drumstick that fully restores his HP, and keeps coming. You're halfway through a fight that was already super demanding, and then it resets. Like, the fight was already long before that moment. I'm not going to go over the Superstar Saga and Bowser's Inside Story remake separately, since it's not really much different in terms of battles, but I did think that was worth a mention. Sticker Star's difficulty really comes down to the stickers you have and the health you have, because you have no badges or any real progression, so your best bet is literally just avoiding enemies, so you save your good stickers. With bosses, they can be brutally difficult if you don't have the right thing sticker, so you can just get the right thing sticker and that's it. I would say that Gooper Blooper is probably the most difficult boss fight here. Without the sponge, it's a grinding endurance fight. His ink attacks blinds and poisons you, and without the sponge to reflect it back, the fight just really slows down. Like, you just gotta chip at his health while his tentacles hit you for sustained damage with no real way to end it before your sticker supply runs out. With the sponge, it's over quickly because it reflects his ink directly back and shuts down his whole moveset. The gap between these two versions of the same fight is just entirely about whether you found a specific item the game never clearly tells you to bring. Final Bowser is kind of difficult in this regard, and pretty much every other bosses, and I do not like this system at all if I'm being honest. Like, I understand having an item to make it easier, but these fights are either just too long or just too easy, depending on if you have the item, and it feels like there's just not really a balance. Dream Team is another game with a pretty solid difficulty. After the tutorial that's longer than the wait for a new 3D Mario, you get introduced to some of the best combat in the series. The real world fights feel really smooth, and the Dream fights have all those fun Luigi attacks. Dreamy Bowser is the hardest fight here and one of the toughest in the series, and I've said that a few times, and I've meant it every time, because this one is not easy. He heals repeatedly throughout, eating meat and summoning minions back alongside himself on a cycle that just never stops. If your damage output isn't high enough to outspace the recovery, you end up in a loop, not a spiral. Comment if you get that reference, even though I know it's the opposite. But anyway, this can go on for like 30 or 40 turns of just sustained effort, and his health bar is roughly where it started. I really don't see many people make arguments against this being the hardest. It really is just a grind fest and getting your timing down, which is easier said than done. Also, remember Dream Team has a hard mode after you complete it, which does exactly what it says and makes this absolutely insane. Being honest, I've never played the hard mode, but I've seen gameplay of it, and yeah, I would go back to this game to try it, but this game does tend to go on for a while, but maybe for a video I'll replay it. I also do want to mention Giant Bowser X in the Battle Ring is the hardest optional battle in this game. It's one of those giant fights where you tilt your 3DS. He's at the end of the full boss gauntlet, so you're already pretty worn down before the fight even starts, and then a single hit from him can take roughly half your HP. This format also doesn't give you the recovery window regular combat does, which means there's also no margin for error from the opening turn. I've also some people talk about glitches in this, where Luigi just gets continuously dragged towards the lava until he dies, which just already makes a brutal fight even more difficult. People also bring up Zkeeper X and Phantasm X from the Battle Ring as serious alternatives, and you could definitely argue those. Phantasm X in particular is also a really hard fight. So this game technically qualifies as an RPG, and I also paid full price for this on launch day in 2015 for some reason. Puzzles & Dragons Super Mario Bros. Edition is a crossover with mobile puzzle games where you match colored orbs to deal damage. So the entire part of what makes a boss hard is about orb management and combo execution rather than attack pattern and counter timing. I mean, I guess the hardest fight is Dry Bowser in the post-game special world. It's just a significantly tougher version of the final encounter, which is the hardest mandatory fight in the game. I barely even remember this, so I don't have much to say about it. If you're curious about this game, you can find it for like 15 bucks. Paper Jam has one of the most interesting premises in the series. 2 Marios, 2 Bowsers, the entire Paper Mario cast potentially colliding with the Mario and Luigi universe, and uses almost none of it. I mention this every time I bring up this game, but you got the same Koopa Troopas, the same Goombas, the same Toads, and there was so much potential for this. Imagine old bosses from the series coming back, especially since they come from a storybook. You can literally bring back any boss, whether they're even still alive in the series. Like imagine if you got to fight Dementio here in like an RPG format, or the Shadow Queen, or something like that. Instead, you literally just fight the most basic Mario enemies. So I picked this game up at launch, and it was actually one of the first games I ever covered as it was coming out on YouTube, but I have not played it since. But if I remember correctly, Dry Bowser was the hardest fight. So that's at the end of the battle ring after a full gauntlet. He throws bones, he inhales party members to heal himself, and when his health drops, he summons pairs of Koopalings beside him. When you finally beat Dry Bowser, the fight still isn't over because you have to clear the Koopalings too. It is pretty frustrating because you think you're done and then realize you're not. But now let's get to the hardest mandatory fight, and I'm gonna go with Shiny Robo Bowser. And I've actually seen some people argue he's the harder fight overall, and I think that's reasonable. When you damage Bowser and Paper Bowser enough, Paper Bowser absorbs his entire paper army and transforms into a massive suit of cardboard armor that real Bowser jumps inside. The armor has its own HP and reforms at specific health thresholds. Trio attacks are locked out entirely while it's intact. Like if you try one, he counters with his own version and your party takes the hit. The fire attacks deal critical damage to the armor specifically. The last part is a piece most people don't know going in, and without it, you're grinding against something that was rigged from the start. Color Splash is better than Sticker Star and actually has a slight incentive to battle. It does increase how much paint you can hold, but you really don't need that. You can pretty much skip all the fights here. It does look great though, it has great music, but I also didn't find any bosses here particularly memorable. The hardest by far for me was Black Paint Bowser. So this is 4 phases, and each requires Mario to paint him before real damage lands while black lava bubbles spawn throughout the arena. At the end, Bowser charges a final attack that deals 120 damage, which is a game over, but if you block it, Huey absorbs the last of the black paint, and Bowser's left helpless, and one final hit ends the fight. If you don't know that blocking triggers all that, and you try to survive a 120 damage hit instead, and you don't, whether you know that one specific thing going in is pretty much the whole thing. Kingdom Battle is very interesting because it introduces tactical RPG combat, and for me, I'm just not very good at it, so this game just is more difficult to me. Like with Paper Mario and Mario and Luigi, these are games I've been playing since I was a little kid, so I like to think I'm pretty good at it. Mario plus Rabbids, I'm just not the best at. So the game's actually pretty challenging throughout, and for me, I had the most trouble with Mega Dragon Bowser. The fight is just built to dismantle every tactical habit you've developed across the whole campaign. It opens with lava Valkyries on the field that hit hard and heal themselves if you ignore them. So from the very first turn, you're already splitting attention between clearing them and chipping at a boss with a massive HP bar, which pretty quickly throws off any positioning you came in with. Then Bowser flies out of reach and starts bombing craters into the terrain, actively changing the cover layer mid-fight. Whatever you built in the first section is now useless and you're rebuilding under fire. The final stretch requires you luring him into metal blocks to stun him, which is the only real way damage opens up. And if you go in not knowing that you spend the whole section doing nothing useful while he keeps hitting you, the first time through this fight is mostly dying and figuring out what each section actually wants from you. By the time I was like, I understand it now, I already lost enough times that the satisfaction of actually beating this fight was super high. I'd say Ultimate Challenge 4 is the hardest optional content in the game. It's technically an escort mission rather than a boss fight, but honestly harder than most of the actual boss fights. You're protecting a Toad with 400 HP through multi-wave enemies with a 30 turn limit. The Toad gets specifically targeted by the enemy AI, and the enemy composition punishes pretty much every setup that worked elsewhere. Origami King is better than the 2 games that came before it, and the boss design in this is actually pretty creative. While normal fights in the game have you in the inside of the ring lining up enemies, the boss fights are actually reversed where the boss is in the middle and you have to get to them. So the fights in this game are kind of like puzzles, especially the boss fights, and it does open up a lot more opportunities for this to be difficult. So there's a lot of debate if you look online about which one's the most difficult, and there's no one right answer here, but for me it was Fire Elemental. It fills the arena with burning feathers that block your path and deal damage if you step on them, and the arena gets increasingly cluttered with hazards as the fight goes on. The answer is to summon the Water Elemental to extinguish the flames and expose the boss for a 1000 folds arm attack, but if you mistime it, you can lose a huge amount of progress and end up rebuilding the board again. So you're managing an increasingly messy arena, taking damage from every direction, timing the water summon precisely, and if you get it wrong, the whole fight starts slipping away from you. Stapler also was brought up as one of the harder fights in the game. Staple mechanic is just brutal, but I think Fire Elemental's ability to undo your setup mid-fight probably ended the most attempts for me. So of course, King Ali is the final boss here, and his first phase has him cycling through Elemental forms with healing added if you take too long solving the ring puzzle. The sumo phase with Bowser alongside you is a pretty good bit, and the scrambled color puzzle at the end is fine. He's a good final boss, but just not the hardest boss fight in this game. And honestly, I think there's probably a couple others besides the ones I mentioned that are even more difficult. Sparks of Hope expansion expands on King to Battle in pretty much every direction, instead of like weapon variety, I guess, and I did like it a little more than the original. Giant Magnethal is locked behind collecting almost every spark in the game, and most players probably never even see him, but that's going to be my pick for the most difficult here. His Vacuum Pull drags your heroes out of position mid-fight, and Spell Razor despawns can quickly buff the battlefield if you leave them alone, so you just have to choose between keeping your positioning intact and preventing the fight from spiraling out of control while he's moving the whole time and making both harder. The individual mechanics here are very manageable, but all of them at once is where this really gets messy. Cursa was the hardest mandatory fight for me, and honestly a pretty solid fight. Her Astral Arms have to be destroyed before her core opens up. A Spiral Ray in the second phase gives you enough wind-up to reposition if you're paying attention, and the third has you charging Rosalina's wand while she keeps applying pressure. It actually is a really fun fight because I don't feel like it drags. So now into Super Mario RPG Remake, which I want to talk about separately because it adds quite a few new bosses. So here there's Coolx 3D, who has 9,999 HP. The original Coolx already felt like it went on forever, and this one is longer and more difficult, and just comes with a new layer of decision making. Each crystal you takes down gives Coolx a buff. Red raises his attack, blue boosts his magic stats, yellow raises his defense, green raises his speed. In the original, you destroyed crystals to reduce the number of targets acting against you, which was straightforwardly good. Here, every crystal you destroy makes Coolx more dangerous, so you have to decide which buffs you're willing to hand him in what order. If you get that wrong, the back half just becomes incredibly hard. Then there's the Meteor countdown. While any crystal is alive, Meteor repeatedly fires on a countdown and drops the entire party to 1 HP. So if you're trying to keep crystals alive to avoid handing Coolx buffs, you're also watching the clock tick towards a near wipe you can't afford. One Meteor with barely any items is basically the end of a run, and once all the crystals are finally down, Coolx attacks twice per turn and gains Final Claw, a 9,999 damage move that can instantly remove a party member if you don't block it. After you beat him, he tells you how many turns it took, and the reward is a crystal shard. So if you're doing this, you're just doing it for the love of the game. And then there's other post-game rematches here. Johnny, Punchinello, Booster, they're all pretty tough. I'd say Johnny's especially tough for his one-on-one duel mechanic that removes your whole party. Worth doing if you're going for everything, but none of them are in the same conversation as Coolx 3D. And again, I'd say Smithy's probably the hardest mandatory boss fight. And like with Super Mario RPG, I also want to talk about the 1,000-Year Door remake, because this adds Prince Mush as an optional boss. Unlock through a Trouble Center request from Jolene that eventually leads to a challenge fight at the Glitz Pit. He used to be a character you only even heard about, the former champion before Macho Grubba took over. The remake lets you actually fight him, and it turns out there was actually a really good reason he was champion. He has both an attack and defense stat of 6, and most bosses in this game sit pretty dramatically lower than that. Standard attacks with the best equipment in the game deal 3 or 4 damage, which makes the opening turn feel like swinging into concrete. The answer is defense piercing moves like Piercing Blow, Koopster's Shell Slam, Flurry's Lip Lock, each bypassing his defense entirely. Super Guarding breaks his stance and drops his defense, opening up for more damage. He cycles between 2 stances. The power stances raises his attack and leaves him technically open, but he hits hard enough that open doesn't mean what you want it to mean. The dodge stance means attacks that should connect simply don't, and if you burn FP on nothing while the fight drags on, it's very easy to go down pretty quickly. There's also another new boss here, Wacka, and you have to do a lot here. You have to beat the main story, beat Bonetail in the Pit of 100 Trials, and also repeatedly hit Wacka on Key All Key. Don't think he's as difficult as Prince Mush though. And like with Super Mario RPG, I'd still say the most difficult mandatory fight is Shadow Queen, but now there's a retry option added and cutscenes are now skippable, so it makes it a little more manageable. And finally, we arrive at Mario and Luigi Brothership, but it really starts to drag on in the back half. And I felt like I could have been a higher level, but I just kind of wanted to get through it quicker, so I wasn't the highest level I could have been. So maybe that made this a little more difficult for me. But anyway, I'd say Gloam Pipe Gunk is the hardest fight in the game. The recommended level is 43, the final boss is 44, so just one level separates an optional side quest from the actual endgame, with no real warning about what's there. He cycles between fire and ice forms based on the environment, controlled from the background by a shadow version of Shun, switching periodically to knock your damage type out of sync. In whichever element he's currently in, he recovers huge chunks of HP constantly. If you play carefully here, which is pretty much how you're supposed to play, he's just going to heal faster than you're hurting him. So you have to stay aggressive while he's also hitting you the hardest, and his attacks inflict Gloam status that locks out Bro's attack. Without the auto Amperi plug handling that automatically, your best damage options just vanish mid-fight, and don't come back until you spend a separate item to fix it. Now, Gloam Bowser and Zoe also get mentioned a lot. Gloam Bowser has an expanding Gloam field that damages you every turn it reaches your side of the arena, and the Pipe Fireball section can be pretty tough, so I think that's fair too. Gloam Reclusa is the hardest mandatory fight and the longest in the game. A shooter into a full RPG battle with Doom Blooms adding pressure, then a second shooter phase going vertical with tighter patterns, then a final descent with hammer charges. Failing deep in a late phase sends you back to the full sequence, and it can just have you losing your mind, if you haven't already lost your mind by just spending like 60 hours in this game. And that's the hardest boss fight in every Mario RPG in my opinion. I know I didn't go over Superstar Saga and Bowser's Inside Story, because I don't think there's as many interesting differences there that are really worth going over. But anyway, if you made it this far, be sure to like, subscribe, and join my Discord, and also click on some of these videos on screen. I'm sure there'll be another Mario RPG video you'll like if you like this. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you next time.